Bitcoin is flirting with all-time highs. It was at $123,000 earlier today. Now it's gone back down a little bit, down to 121, 120 or so. But almost everybody is wrong about Bitcoin right now as it's flirting with these all-time highs. Okay, I know that even though Bitcoin is the highest price it's ever been, and that the free market in the world is pricing Bitcoin basically at the highest it's ever been in terms of US dollars, still, most people are wrong. And if you're watching this video, you're in the 1% of people that actually understand what's going on here. Most people out there in the world aren't watching this video. They aren't in the Bitcoin market and they don't understand what's happening. They see the fiat price of Bitcoin. They see it's $120,000 and they say, oh my goodness, I'm too late. I'm not going to buy any because, oh my gosh, what happens if 120K goes back down to 60K? That's a 50% correction. I can't stomach that volatility. I'm going to stick with my CDs, my bonds, my political currency units, right? Most people simply look at the Bitcoin price in terms of dollars. And what they see is they say, hey, 4 years ago, 5 years ago or whatever, when Bitcoin was $60,000, it crashed all the way down to $20,000. Why would it not possibly crash from 120K all the way back down to 60K? But most people are wrong. 99% of the world's population, of America's population, and of the internet's population, 99% are wrong because they're not buying Bitcoin. You know they're wrong because they're not buying Bitcoin. And the key critical factor those people are missing is the volume and the liquidity. Nearly 60% of all Bitcoin has traded above the US dollar fiat price of $98,000. The majority of Bitcoin has traded at levels barely 20, 30, 40% down from here. The majority of Bitcoin. And so while people, the 99%, not you, but the 99%, while the 99% of people look and say, oh my goodness, Bitcoin's been around 15, 16 years or so, and it's only been over $100,000 in the last 12 months or so, more or less, totally possible. It goes back down to 60K, 50K, 40K, maybe even zero. Why the heck not? But they're wrong because they're looking at time. They're not looking at the most recent move in Bitcoin's exponential adoption. If you actually looked at this, you would not be saying Bitcoin has spent most of its time below $100,000. You'd be saying most Bitcoin has traded hands above $100,000, at least most of the volume, I should say, in the course of the last 12 months. And so the point with this is not to say, I know exactly what's going to happen next. We're going to $137,000 next week. Buy my trading indicator course. That's not what this is about at all. It is about a larger perspective. The Bitcoin treasury companies have been hammered. They've been crushed way more than personally what I expected. I think way more than what most people watching this video is probably expected, right? MicroStrategy, now known as Strategy, has been pretty much flat for basically a year. In fact, it's still down from its November high last year, right? 11 months this thing has been consolidating, MSTR. Metaplanet's also down 80%. Other Bitcoin treasury companies, which I'm much less of a fan of, are down 90%, 95%, 96% or more, right? It's insane. A lot of these treasury companies have been absolutely crushed. I'm not saying they're necessarily bad companies, just saying I think there are better opportunities out there. But at the end of the day, those Bitcoin treasury companies, I think more so the point here is that it's just sentiment has been crushed. A lot of people are saying Bitcoin's over. A lot of people are saying the Bitcoin treasury company is over. You must remember the entire Bitcoin treasury space is, roughly 1 million Bitcoin, a little over 1 million Bitcoin, over half of that being in the hands of Michael freaking Saylor himself. The point is, you got to remember how tiny this market is. Okay, we're talking about maybe a couple $100 billion for all the Bitcoin treasury companies. We're talking about a couple $1 trillion for the Bitcoin market. And so most people look at something at the face value of what it is today, and that's where they make their critical error. They look at Amazon back in 2000 or 1999 or 2002 and whatever, and they say, Amazon only sells books. What is the market for books, right? How big is that total addressable market for books? I'm not going to look for it. I'm only looking at the face value of today. In 2012, 15, 17, 19, or whatever, people looked at Tesla Motors. Elon Musk's had a big run in 2020 and 2021 of his stock, right? Tesla did whatever, some 5, 10, 20x, whatever it was, I don't remember. But people looked at the face value. They were looking at this as purely a car company instead of a larger tech, AI, and now apparently soon, some point, robotics and everything else company, right? This is why people miss massive opportunities. They're looking at the present moment and they're looking at the past, and they don't understand what I've been saying for years now, which is you have less in common with the near future than the ancient past. I say that repeatedly because it's true and because that has been really useful in my personal life. Right now, I am not married. I don't have kids, right? I have many of my wonderful family members are still alive. However, family members that are in the older generations of your family may not be here forever, right? You have less in common with your family's future than your family's past. The same thing if you don't have kids, or you're currently having kids, or you're not yet married, or you're single, or whatever, right? Your family situation, you have less in common with the future and the past. Your business, your career, right? You have less in common with the future and the past. And the same thing is true with technology, and the same thing is true with the world economy. I believe the dollar is closer to being over than it is to starting. Okay, I think that is very obvious because the dollar is a quarter of a millennia old, right? Like the dollar is not going to survive another 250 years. Some would say it's not even going to survive the next 25 years, right? But the point is, I don't know whether the dollar is going to survive 2 years, 10 years, 80 years, or 200 years. I don't know, but I can confidently say the dollar has less in common with its future than its past. And even if it survives the next 100 or 250 years or so, good luck. Even if it does that, it's going to lose the vast majority of its purchasing power. As Michael Saylor says, the American political currency, the US dollar network, was the most successful currency network in the world, and it still lost 99.7 or whatever percent of its value, right? In every sense of the word, the purchasing power of the dollar has less in common with the future than the past, and Bitcoin has less in common with the future than the past. And most people are so obsessed at looking at the past and trying to project the future based upon their understanding of the past, they're missing the point entirely. They don't see the larger trend that is happening. Sure, you could say, oh, Bitcoin's 120K, maybe I'm too late to Bitcoin now, oh, boohoo, baha, whatever, right? I should have bought Bitcoin at $80,000 when Luke Boyles was telling me to, or I should have been buying whatever, right? But the reality is, you got to keep in mind, there are many people watching this video that have only been buying Bitcoin over the course of the last, let's say, 6 to 18 months, okay? All of those people have experienced virtually no major Bitcoin up moves, okay? I'm starting to meet these people, right? Basically, people have been, yeah, Luke, thanks for your videos. I've been in Bitcoin for a year now. I've been stacking, X whatever Bitcoin, trying to do this and that, the other. I'm trying to learn all these things, blah, blah, blah. I'm so excited for my first real pump, right? Because Bitcoin's basically been flat for an entire year. And this is something that the people that aren't thinking ahead, the people that, are afraid what happens if Bitcoin crashes 50% back to $60,000. The thing that they're missing is that Bitcoin spent mere weeks over the $60,000 level, right? A month and a half or whatever it was, right? And the 200-week moving average was whatever it was, 12,000, 15,000, maybe 18,000 or so, right? It was, it wasn't that much, right? As recently as the bear market bottom in 2022 for Bitcoin, the 200-week moving average was in the mid $20,000 range. Now here we are, 3 years later, and that 200-week moving average has basically doubled from here, right? The new 200-week moving average is somewhere in the low $50,000 range. And I suspect even if Bitcoin stopped the vertical moves we've been seeing the last 24 hours and we actually entered a bear market and 124K was the top, the reality is the 200-week moving average is skyrocketing so fast in the last 3 years because we've had such a tremendous volume at these levels. And so I know that a lot of the goldfish brains and TikTok brain rotted people, I know that a lot of them are, upset. Oh, boo-hoo, Bitcoin's only gone from 60 grand to 120 grand over the course of the last 4 years. This is a scam, right? This is the most disappointing crypto bull market, whatever. Oh, I'm going to go trade some other crap, right? They're missing the point. Yes, sure, the Bitcoin price has only doubled over the course of the last 4 years, but the 200-week moving average has increased by a factor of 3, 4, even 5, depending on what exact 4 or 5 year timeline you want to look at, right? The larger point is, yes, even though the price from here to there, your specific, short time interval perspective may not be what you've expected, the reality is we've had such a tremendous amount of volume over the course of the last year, I strongly suspect that we are preparing for vertical up moves. How much? I don't know, right? All the people in Bloomberg and making all the big predictions with all their analyst headlines, right? They get paid way more than me to make way more specific predictions than I do. And guess what? They're pretty much all wrong, right? And if they're right, typically it's by a fluke or a chance, right? So the point is, it doesn't matter what Bitcoin's doing in the next week, day, quarter, decade, year. None of that matters. At the end of the day, what matters is, are you using Bitcoin for the things in your life that actually are important to you? Are you using Bitcoin to buy your peace of mind back? Are you using Bitcoin to buy your time back? Are you using Bitcoin to do the things in your life that are actually more important? Understand that yes, Bitcoin has less in common with its new future than this past. The majority of Bitcoin price actions in the future, not in the present or the past, right? It's taken 15 years for Bitcoin to make it to its first $100,000, okay? By the time Bitcoin's $500,000, the next $100,000 move would probably take a year, right? A decade from now, Bitcoin will be moving $100,000 every other week. A couple decades from now, it'll be moving $100,000 per coin every few hours or every few days or whatever, right? The point is, yes, with Bitcoin, you less in common with the future and the past. And so there was no point speculating. Is Bitcoin going to 12 cents or 13 cents or whatever? Is Bitcoin going from $121, $123? I can't wait till we're $135. I think the cycle tops at $180. Maybe we'll make it to $200. My friend, it doesn't matter. The only difference between those people 10 years ago and to you today is that you're talking about longer time horizons, right? People 10 years ago were trying to trade Bitcoin between 121 to 125 to 130 to $180 a coin over the course of days. Now people today are trying to trade the same percentage price moves over the course of weeks or maybe months, right? But in both cases, that's not a wise move, because in both cases, you don't know what's going to happen. And likewise, I don't know what's going to happen. And this is why in so many of my videos, despite being a hyper optimist with bullish Bitcoin hopium, I try to keep the timelines out of the question to the best of my ability, because I think the longer your time horizon, the better you're going to sleep at night. And the longer your time horizon, the more you understand what's actually going on. You understand that no matter if Bitcoin's flat for you or not, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Bitcoin's been flat for a year. People are bored. Bitcoin's flirting with all-time highs and virtually nobody cares. The 99% don't care. But the reality is this last year has been a tremendous, massive, amazing win for Bitcoin. Why? Because we have more Bitcoin treasury companies entering the market, and they are not here in size yet, because we're only talking about a couple $100 billion, right? Keep in mind that NVIDIA's market cap moves every few hours, every few days more than the entire Bitcoin treasury space, despite NVIDIA, being valued at whatever, like a centuries of future earnings or whatever, right? But the point is, this is why those stocks or government bonds, this is why those aren't valid investments anymore, in my opinion. You can't be projecting forward at half a century or a whole century of future earnings from one of these technological companies when the entire basis of their thesis of developing technologies, all this technology is going to be relevant in 100 years. How can you price Tesla or NVIDIA out 100 years when the technologies that you're pricing into the future aren't going to be relevant in 100 years, right? It's like trying to price forward a century of Standard Oil, 100 years ago, when the reality is that the company and the technology and the world's going to change over so many times. It's impossible to know what's going to happen. And so ironically, even though people hold Bitcoin for a personal longer time horizon, the reality is, ironically, it's a lot safer because it's much more durable into the future. These other stocks, these government bonds, they're not nearly as durable in the future as Bitcoin is. And this is why Bitcoin has been making tremendous wins, even though it may not feel like it, because this Bitcoin all-time high is boring, or Bitcoin's not skyrocketed up, right? The reality is, it just takes time. And if we look at the price of gold and we see that meteoric, tremendous rise of a multi-deca-trillion-dollar asset of a shiny metal rock that barely gets any news press coverage, that people can't buy on an exchange, how much more excitement, how much more euphoria, how much more insanity do you think is going to happen when Bitcoin, because it typically follows gold, is going to begin copying gold? At the end of the day, I don't know. If we're going to get a FOMO, hopium, Bitcoin blow off top, maybe we do, maybe we don't. If we don't, that's no problem, because if we don't, that means that institutions and companies can just start rolling out different kinds of Bitcoin loans and credit. And the more Bitcoin credit you have, the more Bitcoin price goes up. The more Bitcoin price goes up. It's a feedback loop, right? It is a Ponzi scheme. It is not sustainable. However, because you're denominating in fiat in that Ponzi scheme, and because fiat itself is a Ponzi scheme, it doesn't matter. Fiat's a problem, not Bitcoin. So sure, there may not be a Bitcoin FOMO blow off top, right? The Bitcoin all-time highs get more and more boring over the course of the last couple of years. But the reality is, that's okay. If there's not a Bitcoin FOMO bull market top, then we just have chop solidation up into the right for who knows how long. If we do have a Bitcoin FOMO bull market top, then we have less in common with the near future in the past. The majority of your net worth between now and 2026 or 2027 may be in the next 6 to 18 months, not the last 6 to 18 years. And you got to take that really seriously. This is why I've been encouraging people for literally years. Get your custody, estate plan, taxes, all that set and done, right? People think that I just talk about that to, blow smoke, but it's so very true. I have this conversation with people all the time. They're like, oh my gosh, it took me decades to reach 100K, then it took me years to reach $1 million. Now I'm looking at this and I might reach, I might have $1 million, $10 million year, a couple years in front of me, right? This is why it's so important. You got to plan ahead for the future, and you got to think critically and understand you have less in common with the near future than the past. You got to prepare as if the majority of your net worth is in the next 10th or 1/10 iteration of time as the previous 10 iterations of time, right? You got more net worth coming your way in the next 1 year than the previous 10 years. You probably got more net worth coming your way in the next 3 years than the previous 30 years, however long you've been working, right? I know this is true for me when I look at everything going on, and this is almost certainly true for you if you have a significant percentage exposure to Bitcoin. So calm down, hold tight. Congratulations on basically effectively reaching a Bitcoin all-time high. It's very possible literally any hour we could hit that. But remember, even though it might feel like you're too late to Bitcoin because it's literally never been this expensive before in terms of dollars, the reality is 99% of the world is still misunderstanding this thing entirely and they make all kinds of silly comments saying, oh, well, you know, Bitcoin might fall back down to 60K, right? It was there 4 years ago. Why couldn't it be there again? People don't understand what's actually happening under the hood because they're not looking under the hood. They're just looking at the face value of what you see today. So thank you for watching this video. Hopefully it was useful to you. Congratulations on the new Bitcoin all-time high, and I will see you, or effectively we're basically there, right? But more importantly, we're there without the euphoria and the excitement that we saw last year after the election in the United States. So thank you for your time. Thank you for watching this video. I will see you in the next one. Have a wonderful day and enjoy God's beautiful creation and the sunset. So, you know, live your life, right? You only got, you know, whatever, 5 to 20,000 days left here on Earth. Only 5 to 20,000 sunsets left. Go out and enjoy them. Stop watching YouTube videos and going down the rabbit hole, please. Thank you. Subscribe. See you in the next video, and goodbye.